Hello everyone, my name is Matthew and welcome to Preserving Memories, where I take precious, though vulnerable pieces of our past and refresh, renew, restore them back to their original glory. And in this episode, I'm going to be showing how I refreshed and renewed a most likely mid-century modern curio cabinet slash display case slash china hutch. This was all done back in 2021. I like to refer this project as a non-destructive upgrade, and I'll show you what I mean as the video progresses. This was my first real woodworking project, and so I learned a lot along the way. I actually started this before my great-grandfather's heirloom dressers, but took care of them both somewhat simultaneously. Now, this particular display cabinet is most accurately described as a china hutch, as it's divided into two, though two inseparable parts. The bottom half being more of a credenza, with a thoughtful dovetail jointed drawer, and a 3-shelf display portion divided by 2 magnetized glass enclosed doors on the upper half. I found this really beautiful, unique piece back in 2013 at my local Salvation Army for $90 at the time. It was selling for half off. I was so desperate for one at the time, as I have a lot of family heirlooms as well as ocean liner memorabilia to display. Since that time, it has become something of a cluttered and confused mess. It was also dark inside with no interior lighting and just kind of dingy overall. Non-destructive is graphic designer terminology, which implies that I'm not going to permanently alter anything and thereby keep the original integrity intact. This included replacing the 2 wooden brown painted shelves it came with something clear to bring in more light and literal transparency for better observation of the items displayed, and just to make it more bright and airy while I was at it. The original shelves weren't of the highest quality, they even look a little rushed together, but they did include 2 thoughtfully carved indentations known as V-grooves to make displaying things like saucers and plates a more streamlined look, and I really wanted to recreate that. I was keen on the idea of plexiglass, since it was lighter than glass and less likely to break. More on that later. I also wanted a mirror against the backboard to both, again, bring in more light, as well as a better sense of depth, and I also love the idea of the reflection bringing different viewing perspectives of the objects displayed, front and back and the like. I wanted to be careful not to let the added mirrors make it look 1980s or 1990s, as mirrors were very common in display cabinets of the time, though those mirrors also often had a tan or brownish tint that I wasn't about to recreate, quite frankly. We're upgrading, but I wanted the mid-century modern charm this piece elicited to remain as intact as possible. And lastly, I wanted to add string fairy lights in place of more complicated LEDs to add atmosphere and, per usual, a better viewing experience to everything on display. On the restoration end, I also planned on giving this beautiful historical piece a general and much needed cleanup and repolish. Hence the looking shabby overall that I described earlier. A glow-up, if you will. This included the metal hardware. I could not wait to see the dirt and grime that had accumulated over the decades disappear to allow such a charming piece to shine like it no doubt did the first time it was purchased, however many decades ago. History of the piece and the curio cabinet. As I've researched and been more exposed to historical furniture, the very blonde light brown of this piece communicated either post-Art Deco, when design was transitioning from the elaborate, curvy, French-polished wood veneers to the much more simplistic, boxy, atomic look usually associated with mid-century modern design. This blonde wood tone was popular in the 1940s, to be specific, but it also made a certain comeback in the 1960s. There are indications that I hoped would lead me to the answer as to when and where this piece came from, and I will speak more of my findings as the restoration work progresses throughout this video. I believe even when it was constructed that it was something of a budget item because of some of the hasty ways it was put together, and because of the strange rubber plasticky material used to hold certain parts together in certain areas, which I will go over. Also, most of the wood surface is veneered, where a thin piece of high quality and visually interesting wood is glued over a more affordable type of wood that takes care of the structural integrity. It's just a very curious piece because not one specific time period seems to stand out for me. That is why I think it came out during a transitional time in history, sometime between the 1940s and the 1960s. But quality is clearly there in its sturdy and, at the same time, lightweight construction. My godbrother helped me to bring it home, and though it's bulky, it's also beautifully lightweight, which is something I always appreciate, especially in vintage furniture. History of the Curio cabinet. Now, Preserving Memories both covers my restoration journey of the pieces I plan on rescuing, and it also delves into its history and brings further love and appreciation for the piece presented. And the history of the Curio cabinet dates back at least half a millennia. I didn't realize how rich the concept, let alone the idea of the Curio cabinet was, and it made me love it that much more. Display cases have grown into a number of shapes and sizes over the centuries, but one title dates back to the inception of this very curious design, the Curio cabinet, or the Cabinet of Curiosity.
Cabinets of curiosity have always been about learning to see, to figure out how the world works. It's not just about looking at strange things. It's looking at strange things in relation to yourself. The thing that Cabinets of Curiosities gave birth to, the museum, the root of that word, museum, is museo. It leads right back to the muses. The other word that's linked to museum is curator. And curator and curiosity both have the same root in the Latin word cura, to care.
The origins of this novelty piece of furniture used to house grandma's fine china and Snow White figurines is even more a history in the advancement of science and great cultural shifts, of the inception of the great museums we know and flock to today, and of the eclectic nature of our constantly growing world. That's right, the Curio cabinet helped expand our knowledge and understanding of cultures all throughout the world. Who would have known looking at it? It makes me appreciate the whole idea of the Curio cabinet that much more. Since restoring this piece, I have somehow been able to accumulate 2 more in my relatively small space, and they couldn't have made my space feel more cozy or more cultured, if I do say so myself. Measuring and emptying. Removing everything was very cathartic, but I did have an unexpected sense of loss during the process. Most of these items hadn't been moved since I first purchased the Hutch in 2013, and I think the heart of the matter, which made it strangely difficult, is the simple concept of change, especially when the change is so closely associated with major turning points in your life, and 2013 was just that for me. With that said, even good change can be difficult to deal with. And I mean, the impact of the 2020 pandemic probably played a role in this strange, unexpected emotion I was feeling. This was 2021, after all. But it didn't take too crazy long to face the impacts of revisiting this time in my life and return to the excitement that was improving the quality of the piece itself, as well as my own quality of life. Once everything was safely out of the way and in temporary storage, I conducted a thorough cleanup and dusted absolutely everything. I came to find that the very top of the cabinet was in especially ravaged condition, more on that later. I cleaned up and polished the inside very lightly. This was stage 1 after all, so that this task could be out of the way the soonest was a major goal of mine. It was at this point that I was able to take the measurements in order to fulfill the non-destructive upgrades I was so eager to see implemented. At the time, this was no easy task either. Remember when I said that I wanted to use acrylic or plexiglass sheets for the replaced shelves for cost effectiveness, safety, and to make the overall piece lighter? Well, this was 2021, I will repeat again and again, and we were still in the middle of the pandemic when acrylic sheets were in demand and the most expensive we've ever seen them. So I found this one on Amazon for $90. Remember also when I said that this was my first real restoration project? Well, it was harder than I thought to custom cut myself, and so I entrusted it into a local glassmaking company who brought to my attention the flimsy nature of the specific acrylic sheet I chose. So that became a no-go. I sold it later on Craigslist for, I believe, $60 and was able to recoup some of the money I originally spent on it. Lesson learned. So you don't make the same mistake I did, the 6mm thick 24 by 36 inch panel I purchased on Amazon would allow me to custom cut two 11 by or 12 by 37 inch pieces. As it turned out, 6mm or 1/4 inch thickness is too thin. It should be at least 12mm or 1/2 inch thick for it to be reliable and not easily bend on you. As for comparing the advantages I mentioned over glass versus plexiglass, if you're debating about which one to use, while glass is heavier and can shatter, it is also harder, stronger, doesn't scratch as easily, reflects light better, won't bend and flex on you, can withstand higher temperatures, and it won't fade or become brittle. As for me, during this time in world history, glass wound up being cheaper than the quality acrylic sheets I originally sought after. It's really the more premium and apparently more sustainable look anyways, and I'm happy that the glass company I worked with helped me with very intuitive and budget-friendly options. More on them and that process later as well. Removing and polishing the metal fittings and hardware. To say that the hardware needed a refresh was absolutely no exaggeration. I'm not a fan of patina. I prefer my original hardware to shine like the day it was first purchased, if possible, but the condition of this particular hardware didn't even carry with it the charm that patina brings. This was just decades worth of dirt and grime that needed to be cleaned clear off. Simultaneously, I tackled the hinges. I decided, so as not to have to unhinge and then somehow on my own rehinge completely each very bulky display door, to remove each hinge individually, one elevation at a time, if you will. Now, there were hinges that were screwed on too tightly for my screwdriver to safely remove. These I sophomorically tried my best to clean in its place without hindering the wood around them, as best I could. I went a little hard on one of them and I discovered these were not brass or copper hinges at all, but stainless steel finished over with some kind of thin bronze or brass surfacing. One other note that indicated to me that this piece in particular was a budget item. There was a strange coating of stucco or some such material covering over each hinge in one big swoop that appeared to have been applied while the piece was constructed, maybe as an extra protective layer, or more likely to make them blend in better with the overall piece, but it just made it look cheap and rushed to me, and I wound up taking a long time chipping away this stuff. Things like this are what have led me to believe that this particular hutch was built to be on the budget side, again I say, because once I removed this hard material, I found the final look really improved and elevated the appearance overall. The shiny hinges are absolutely beautiful on their own. After the first two hinges, I got a rhythm going and took care of them in 5-ish steps. I discovered that getting them wet actually made it harder to remove, so it took mostly dry rubbing with Barkeeper's Friend and a rag, and once it was all off, it took even more time with Barkeeper's Friend. I don't know where I purchased it, but let's just say it was $3, and a dry rag to make it look shined and polished. This entire process took forever, and all because of that dry, stucco adhesive material. I then took the main hardware, the drawer pulls and the handles, to the kitchen sink to wash and scrub them clean. Then I took the handy trusted Barkeeper's Friend, and at stage 2, scrubbed and polished them to reveal their original finish. This was an absolute breeze compared to the hinges, and the results were night and day. I was so surprised at the degree in which they were transformed. The handles were even really soft to the touch and shined this really bright reflective gold. It completely transformed the look of the overall cabinet too, from rustic chic to authentic vintage glam, if I do say so myself. I then used Mr. Metal Polish, which I got at Ace Hardware for $12, to seal it so that the metal didn't dull over time, and it quite literally seals the metal with a special non-abrasive coating. Once fully removed, there was revealed to me on the also possibly brass-finished stainless steel hinges a brand name, Stanley Hardware. If this is the same Stanley, it is a company that has been around for a super long time, like probably since the 1840s. The way the font was engraved expands several decades, so it was hard to tell the exact era this piece might have come from. And compared to some very ornate hinges from the same brand, these basic but beautiful about 2 by 1 inch hinges the Hutch was endowed with are most definitely on the simple, demure, but thoughtful side. Cleaning and repolishing the wood. I discovered some hidden issues on the top section of the piece that needed attention, quite frankly. What I thought was for aesthetic purposes was more likely a quick fix solution to cover up some structural separation, possibly caused by warping at one point. Maybe it was to change the aesthetic as well. Originally I was just going to remove this crusty portion and even it out. Come to find, this top layer was so crusty and so different from the wood underneath that I just knew there was a fresh original layer spanning the entire top portion. So, I took a standard stainless steel razor, and the material proved to be very brittle, and yet very stubborn in several places. I felt it a little too hazardous and tedious to bring such a large, bulky piece that was this curio cabinet outside so I could accomplish this task, so despite the dust, I decided it was safer to tackle it in situ. This unexpected task took forever. And I repeat, this was my first real restoration project before I became aware of life-saving tools like carbide scrapers that would make this process significantly faster as well as more efficient. It took what felt like all day scraping off this plaster-like material. I then proceeded to cover the gaps with wood filler. The results were, you guessed it, night and day. There are these beautiful wavy lines in the wood, and it lightens it up and makes it so warm and cheery. Again, don't judge me too harshly, I later took some polyurethane wood finish, which is essentially made of plastic. There is water-based and oil-based polyurethane. Water-based is easier to clean up, but tends to look more plasticky, while oil-based is richer and even darkens over time, but requires turpentine or some such material to clean off. I did not use a brush, and this was not wipe-on poly either. Cringe seeing me apply it this way, but it also did the job. And also I would never do it like this again, don't you worry. While the hardware was chiefly removed, I took to polishing the tight-grained, maybe walnut or possibly white oak veneer, while there would be no interference between the hardware and the wood. I just want to note, for anyone who might be confused as I was, that mineral spirits is not the same thing as mineral oil. Mineral spirits, which could include paint thinner, cleans up wood, but it's also used as a thinner when you're sanding wood and preparing it for varnish or paint. Mineral oil, on the other hand, moisturizes the wood and revitalizes it as well. It's akin to buffing waxes like beeswax, for example. I debated between the standard pledge, let's say $5, and totally bamboo, probably about $8. Now, Pledge has elements of mineral oil in it, which at the time made me go for it, and I was told that it will do the job I was looking for it to do. One problem with Pledge is that it can leave a plasticky coating if too much is applied, and the not so ideal aroma tends to linger. Totally Bamboo and others like it are specifically intended for bamboo and butcher block. It is a little more subtle on this display cabinet's veneer, so I use this on the window frames while using the Pledge on the veneer paneling, especially after rubbing away some of the dirt splotches. There was also this random and sizable paint mark at the bottom I chipped away and cleaned and repolished. I could have, should have, very well went with several other options, as there are quite a few quality wood polishes out there, and I definitely would have and have indeed since. For example, I would have used a clear Dutch oil, or better yet, Feed & Wax's beeswax and conditioner, $9, with steel wool, $5. Both I purchased at my local Home Depot. I've only recently discovered Harbor Freight and discovered that it is so much cheaper for a lot of these supplies. Check there first, FYI, and admittedly I regret using Pledge at all. This was the beginning of my restoration journey, and I still had so very much to learn. Instead of what I actually did, I would have first used some kind of mineral spirits or paint thinner, $20 for 1 gallon at the Home Depot, to clean it, and once that dried, I would have applied a fairly generous amount of orange scented polish and conditioner, feed and wax beeswax with steel wool before buffing it out a few hours later. And you can see me 5 years later doing just that on the outside. Look at the difference. Foundation. I decided to strengthen the space where the cabinet was resting and to make it something of a classy focal point. And so I invested in a large and thick piece of plywood purchased at the Home Depot, $15 if I remember correctly, that I sanded down and varnished with some spar urethane that I inherited from my dad, which is usually meant for outdoors. But this was my first time using it and wanted to discover its effects. I put 2 layers of this on the board, sanding in between coats. Again, I'm cringing at using a rag to apply the finish. The result was a rich, cozy stain that will protect this baseboard for a long time, though it does scrape off very easily. I will repeat, I sophomorically used a rag rather than a brush to apply it. We'll never do that again. 2021 was a different time, and so were my woodworking skills. I then moved the cabinet out of the way, the newspaper dating back to, sure enough, 2013, wedged in between for support, actually acted as a smooth transporter. Vacuuming the area was very important to me, as the area underneath hadn't been vacuumed in, let's just say, a while. And then I placed it back in its corner with the new classy wood support. The victory of being so close to completion was motivating, and just look at how much it sparkled with the polished hardware and wood veneer alike. The shiny mirrored backing. Here is a beautiful, high-quality, beveled at the corners, shiny mirror from Home Depot that I attempted to cut in half myself. But I just didn't have the proper tools to do it safely, nor efficiently, nor effectively. And I realized that I needed to have it done professionally. But then, I tripped over my tripod at one point, which let my TV soundbar come loose, and before I knew it, the mirror was shattered on the floor. Thinking I would have to buy not just 1, but 2 new ones on top of the service fee to get it custom cut, I had this wild, money-saving, postmodern idea to see what 2 of the bigger pieces would look like in the cabinet, and I was very impressed. Not what I originally intended, but very, like, you know, avant-garde or whatever. Who knew that a tragedy like this could lead to something really cool and really money-saving while we were at it? I spent about $5 to $10 more on the mirror than I would have at Target or Walmart. I think back in 2021 this mirror was $25. At first I regretted it, but when I saw that this one from the Home Depot was made of real glass rather than plastic and had a beautiful shine and sheen to it, and with beveled edges at that, it was worth paying a little extra for. I then sanded the edges of the broken glass to soften the edges and make it safe, and it went swimmingly. It really did the job. I think I used 200 grit sandpaper. I used non-abrasive sticky plastic to hold it in as well, though you can also use masking tape. This will not damage the wood veneer in the board backing. This, along with the heavy, sturdy new glass panels, would ensure the mirror's stability. Back to the glass shelves. Speaking of which, then came the shelves. After inquiring from a number of glass places, I wound up deliberating whether the much higher cost of custom glass shelves with V-grooves was worth it, and sure enough, after deliberating with close family and friends, I decided it was a special enough project for me to splurge on just a little bit. The total cost was something like $200 for these custom glass shelves. Though again, the price of acrylic sheets in 2021 probably made this the better quality as well as more cost-effective option. I was surprised at how I was treated with inquiring to 2 different glass shops. One was just very short and uninterested in me. It was like they didn't want my business. The other local business demanded what type of glass I wanted, and I expressed that I didn't know what were the options. He responded by telling me he didn't know unless I told him. in just that harsh, demanding tone. Was he used to being swindled for free advice, maybe? So when I say that this place was not only really hospitable, friendly, and accommodating to my specific needs, working with me to see the best and even most cost-effective option, I really mean it. So if you live in Costa Mesa or in Orange County, California, I sincerely recommend this place because it was harder than I thought to find a good custom glass place. Go figure that. At first, I was told that the custom V-grooves would be super expensive to accomplish, but the man came up with a brilliant and cost-effective way to compromise, and that was by gluing thin glass stands. So I wound up going from V-grooves to A-ridges, let's call them. And while V-grooves are of course the most streamlined and ideal, these A-ridges were really cool and added its own charm. See what I mean about accommodation? This place didn't give me any special treatment, by the way, they just really show that they care about their customers. And you can imagine just how excited I was when I received the finished product. Just look at how clear and shiny and brilliant the final custom glass panels turned out to be. History of the piece and investigation confirmations. Utilizing Google's search by image feature, which I discovered you can complement with word searches as well, I was able to uncover pretty close to what I aspired to know about this specific piece. Because there are so many different styles throughout the centuries, finding an exact match for a china hutch can be like finding a needle in a haystack. So you can imagine my surprise and euphoria when I found 3 exact matching search results. One matching piece sold from Colorado on OfferUp and had wheels attached. Wheels? Upon further investigation underneath my specific hutch, I discerned that these were add-ons later in the piece's life, as there was nothing to indicate a place for wheels. And while convenient, they really did look out of place, which further indicated to me a future modification and something I personally didn't need to worry about replicating. The other listing sold from Atlanta, Georgia on Craigslist and revealed what I believe to be a matching brand name and more insight on the history of the piece. There was a time when this display case was part of a matching furniture set, which included a separate, identical credenza, more widely known as a sideboard these days, and even a full-on dining room set. I was floored at this discovery. Thank you, Google search by image. Hashtag not sponsored, but could you imagine? Burned into just the inside drawer of the matching credenza was the brand name, Bernhardt. Why they didn't include it on every piece in the collection, I have no idea. Was it really that much of an extra effort? Why did you do this to me, Bernhardt? Bernhardt is a company that has been in operation since 1889 and has been a family-owned business for 4 generations. They are apparently a very popular furniture brand as well. Maybe not as coveted as the Drexel brand, but still pretty renowned. Using search results like Bernhardt display cabinet, Curio cabinet, china hutch, combined with different decades, didn't yield any exact matches, unfortunately. The collection changes so often, and within the same decade it looks like even, that my constantly recurring speculation that this was something of a budget set was further realized. So no wonder it wasn't easy to find. It could have even been short-lived. Maybe not one of their most popular purchases, for example, because the transitional very 1940s blonde wood tone trend did not last long. And this very much looks like a product of that transitional time in American history. Maybe it reminded people of the hardships of the Second World War and they just wanted to move on with different styles. That helped associate a more prosperous time. This kind of transitional 1940s into 1950s style also hasn't seen a resurgence, and so therefore is even harder to find, I'm sure, compared to the elegant and French polished Art Deco pieces of the 20s and 30s, and the playful but minimalist atomic 1950s into 60s mid-century modern object d'art, which makes these few findings that much more precious to me. I am so thankful. It would still be nice to know the exact year this china hutch debuted, but you gotta count your blessings, and at least I'm aware enough of the short-lived 1940s design to have some confident speculation. Fairy string lights. And lastly, the true pièce de résistance was adding the fairy string lights I got on Amazon for about $30. These were the 66-inch length ones for maximum cover. I taped them on in such a way to give it as much a floating appearance as possible. They were definitely more loose-fitting than I expected, but I was certainly not surprised or disappointed. Still, it did the job I was looking for, and I curated it so that the looseness at least looked cool and intentional. I was happy with the results, in other words, and it really elevated the hutch as well as the living space around it. The final product / outro. So was all this time and money and research restoring and non-destructively upgrading and elevating this not so sought after vintage piece worth it? The total cost rung me about $380. Looking back, wow, I wonder if I could have been more cost effective. Being my first real project, some of the material I use later on for future projects, so you could call this my starter pack. What I can say is that I am very happy with the results. While my ideal curio cabinet is admittedly Art Deco,
You're so Art Deco.
I have a special history with this piece. It was my first real authentic vintage find, as well as my first real authentic restoration process. And its underappreciated status kind of makes me gear toward it even more and appreciate its look and history and the design and craftsmanship that went into it even more as well. And you know what? I'm glad the final video wasn't released till 4 years after its initial glow up, because I wouldn't have included all the history I have since discovered about it and reflect on how far I've come in woodworking restoration since then. For more videos like this, please hit the subscribe button. I have a good number of restoration videos to come, so join me on this ending is not better than mending rescue journey of our precious, though vulnerable pieces of our past I am striving to save, reuse, and appreciate for their historic character and craftsmanship. See you in the next video.